You can spot a Karen from a mile away, my old partner used to say, half joking, half dead serious. But I never imagined I'd find one basically camping out on my driveway at dawn. So here's the scene. I've just moved to Pine Grove Estates, a place that promises quiet mornings, friendly waves, and freshly baked cookies from next-door neighbors. For about a week, it was exactly that. But on day 8, I step outside in my pajamas, coffee mug in hand, only to find a woman, decked out in designer workout gear, phone camera up, taking a mini photo shoot of my black Ford parked in the driveway. She's got that famed, "I need to speak with your manager" haircut that instantly makes my stomach flip. I'm Alex Wilson, a chief traffic officer with years of experience as a patrol cop. My new house was supposed to be my sanctuary, where I didn't have to flash my badge or break up neighborly disputes. Yet this was shaping up to be as tense as any big city confrontation I'd seen. Hey there! If you're already intrigued by this wild suburban drama, please subscribe to my channel, hit the like button, and drop a comment below telling me which city you're watching from. Your support helps keep these stories coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss how this one unfolds. For a moment, I just stood there sipping my coffee, wondering if she was planning to upload the photos to some secret Hate My Neighbor website. Finally, I managed a polite nod. "Morning, can I help you?" She spun around, phone held tight like a loaded weapon. "Yes, actually, I'm Karen Thompson, president of the Pine Grove HOA. She said it with the same gravity as someone announcing they're the president of Earth. "We have strict rules about commercial or official vehicles. Yours looks suspiciously official." I tried to keep my grin friendly. "It's just my personal car," I explained. Her eyes narrowed, scanning my tinted windows and standard-issue antenna like it was the scariest thing she'd ever seen. We'll have to discuss this at our next HOA meeting," she said in a sing-song voice. Then she turned on her heel, ponytail bouncing, and strode off. I sighed, coffee turning bitter on my tongue. Wonderful. Day 8, and I'd already landed on the local HOA's radar. Little did I know how far she'd push and how serious this parking drama would become. When I first toured Pine Grove Estates, it felt straight out of a real estate commercial. Wide streets, perfectly trimmed hedges, pastel-colored houses with symmetrical shutters. I remember jogging past the big community sign proclaiming, "A peaceful life awaits." I breathed a sigh of relief, certain this was my ticket to a calm, stress-free existence away from the hustle of the city. No more urgent calls in the middle of the night, no more stressful patrol shifts, just a laid-back suburb and a chance to blend in. For a few days, that dream held true. I'd wave at neighbors and they'd wave back. I felt almost giddy, but then came the 8th morning and the run-in with Karen Thompson. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she's just extremely diligent about HOA guidelines. Maybe once she realized my vehicle was just a personal car, she'd back off. Unfortunately, I'd soon learned that backing off isn't in Karen's vocabulary. Within 2 days of our first encounter, I started getting official-looking letters in my mailbox, each with Pine Grove HOA typed in an ornate font. They all cited me for violating community standards by parking a commercial-looking vehicle in a driveway. The suggested remedy? Park in the garage. But guess what? My garage was in the middle of a serious renovation. No way I could fit anything larger than a bicycle in there. Most HOAs might discuss the situation and propose a temporary workaround. Not Karen. She was like a hawk, perched on her front lawn, phone in hand, snapping photos whenever I came or went. Even the slightest beep from my car doors unlocking made her swivel her head like a predator sensing movement. I tried to keep calm. After all, I've dealt with actual criminals, high-speed chases, chaotic city protests. What's one overzealous HOA president? But the truth is, an obsessive neighbor can be just as stressful as any big city standoff. Neighbors would quietly warn me. One whispered, "She basically forced the Johnsons to move out after they hung Christmas lights 2 weeks too early." Another confided, "If she sees a crack in your driveway, she'll threaten to fine you daily until it's fixed." I started to see how one person could hold a neighborhood hostage with enough pettiness and power. Here's the twist. I knew exactly who Karen Thompson was. Before I became chief of traffic, I spent years as a patrol officer, writing up every manner of parking violation in the city. And one name from those days stuck with me: Karen Thompson. She had a knack for racking up tickets and not paying them. I'd personally ticketed her for parking in a handicapped zone without a permit, for blocking a fire hydrant, and for idling in a bus lane during peak hours. Each time she'd give some excuse, promise to pay soon, and vanish. The last time she barely avoided a court summons by paying half the fine. After that, I hadn't heard a peep, until now, living right next door to me. She obviously didn't recognize me out of uniform, but I recognized her. And I recognized the massive backlog of unpaid tickets that still sat in the system. At first, I decided to keep quiet because I didn't want the drama. But as her letters grew more hostile, I realized I might need to use that knowledge if she kept pushing. Letters from the HOA soon tripled in frequency. Words like non-compliance, imminent action, and further legal steps stared at me from fancy stationery. I tried ignoring them, but it was tough. Each new note rattled me more than I cared to admit. I decided to attend an upcoming HOA meeting, if only to see Karen in action. She took the podium, brandishing pictures of my car on a slideshow. "Vehicles like these are a cancer to our peaceful environment," she declared, voice trembling with righteous fervor. "They diminish property values, intimidate families, and set a terrible example of lawlessness." I nearly choked on my water. Lawlessness? If only she knew who I was. A few neighbors glanced my way, clearly uncomfortable with her dramatics. One even coughed a laugh behind his hand. But no one openly challenged Karen. She had this aura of unstoppable authority, like she'd bulldoze anyone who opposed her. I bit my tongue, deciding it wasn't time to speak. I wanted to see what else she had planned. A few mornings later, I was sipping coffee in my living room when flashing lights caught my eye through the window. A police patrol car had pulled up outside. My heart jumped, half out of habit from my patrol days, half from confusion. Why were they here? Looking closer, I saw Susan standing on the sidewalk, arms folded, wearing the smuggest expression I'd ever seen. She gestured wildly at my black Ford, as if presenting evidence of a heinous crime. The officer, a young guy who looked fresh out of the academy, seemed a bit startled by her intensity. I quickly set down my coffee and stepped outside, registration and ID in my back pocket just in case. The officer turned to me, giving a polite nod. "Morning, sir. We got a call about an unauthorized official vehicle in the neighborhood," Susan chimed in, pointing. "I've told him countless times. That car breaks our HOA guidelines. It's scaring the residents." Her voice rose an octave, dripping with faux concern. The officer glanced at me, then at Susan. Ma'am, we generally deal with criminal matters, not HOA disputes." Susan huffed. "It's suspicious. Could be a fake police car for all we know, used for who knows what." I suppressed a sigh. She had no idea I was, in fact, in law enforcement. The officer, doing his due diligence, asked for my ID and vehicle registration. Calmly, I handed them over. He checked them, a flicker of recognition crossing his face when he saw my name, Alex Wilson, Chief of Traffic. His posture shifted slightly, but he kept professional. "All appears legal," he said, returning my documents. Then he turned to Susan. "Ma'am, there's no issue here. This is a registered, privately owned car. Unless there's a specific county or city code violation, I can't act on an HOA rule." Susan's face turned beet red. But it's suspicious," she spluttered. The young officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I suggest you take this up with the HOA board. As far as we're concerned, no crime is being committed." With that, he gave me a respectful nod, probably itching to say more if Susan weren't there, and climbed back into his patrol car. Susan glared at me, practically vibrating with anger. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You might fool the police, but you won't fool me." I forced a polite smile. "Have a nice day," I said, turning to head back inside. My coffee was probably cold by now, but the adrenaline of that confrontation burned hot in my veins. If she was willing to call the police over an HOA disagreement, I dreaded what else she'd try next. A bigger showdown loomed on the horizon. The next HOA meeting promised an official vote on a new bylaw. All vehicles must be pre-approved by the board for driveway parking. If it passed, Karen would have the power to literally ban my car. Meanwhile, I stayed busy at work, occasionally hearing from dispatch that a Karen Thompson kept calling about a suspicious black Ford in her neighborhood. Each time, the dispatcher would politely note that the plate was registered to me, a high-ranking officer, and that everything was legal. My colleagues found it amusing. I found it increasingly frustrating. Late one night, after the third or fourth heads-up from the station, I rummaged through my old records at home. Sure enough, I found an entire file on Karen's unpaid tickets. They totaled hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars. Some were partially paid, others not at all. She'd apparently been ignoring final notices for ages. I stared at the papers, feeling a twinge of guilt at the idea of using them. But she wasn't leaving me much choice. If she wanted to weaponize the HOA against me, I could remind her that ignoring your own violations doesn't exactly lend credibility to your crusade. 2 days before the big vote, I witnessed Karen's most bizarre move yet. Her attempt to prove my car's antenna was dangerous. Early morning, I heard a shrill yell outside my window. "See? See? It's not safe!" I peered out to see her leaning over the hood of my car, tugging on the antenna with an exaggerated grimace as if expecting it to spark or shock her. She cried out, "Ow! It's harming me!" loud enough for half the street to hear. Neighbors peeked out their windows, confused. I rushed out, phone in hand, intending to film the madness. But before I could, she gave one final, dramatic yank. The only thing that snapped free was her wig, which soared into the air like a terrified squirrel, landing with a soft plop near my wipers. For a long second, everyone froze. Karen's eyes went wide. Her hands flew to her exposed scalp. She must have been wearing a wig for volume. Her face morphed from fake pain to raw panic. Then, with a speed I'd never seen, she lunged for the wig, clutched it against her chest, and bolted home, face aflame with embarrassment. I just stood there, blinking. My poor antenna was completely fine, still upright, no sign of damage. A few neighbors peered out, snorting laughter. One actually tried to clap but quickly stopped, probably worried about Karen's reaction. I was torn between sympathy for her wig mishap and annoyance at her sabotage attempt. In the end, all I could do was shake my head and walk back inside, replaying that insane moment in my mind. If I'd hoped the wig incident would humble her, I was wrong. Instead, Karen ramped up her letter campaign. Now, each note warned me about community hazards, referencing my dangerous antenna. She included phrases like unpredictable electromagnetic fields and unknown transmissions. The woman was unstoppable. I'd watch her from my living room window, still pacing her lawn like a guard dog. Sometimes she'd pretend to be watering plants, but her phone was always angled to record me or snap pictures at a moment's notice. A few neighbors privately confided they found it creepy, but no one dared confront her directly. She had that knack for intimidation. Inside, I debated how long I should let this go. My temper was rising. In my job, I faced criminals and major traffic crises with a calm mind. But this neighborly harassment was something else. I kept reminding myself that I had the ultimate trump card, her long unpaid tickets. The only question was when to use it. The morning of the big HOA meeting arrived. Karen had apparently gone door to door pushing for her new all vehicles must be approved rule. Some neighbors texted me saying she was calling my car a secret government spy vehicle and that it threatened their families. I decided that tonight would be the time to confront her. No more playing nice. I gathered the file of her unpaid fines, thick stack of papers that read like a rap sheet. Sure, it felt a bit underhanded, but you don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Before leaving for the meeting, I took a moment to collect my thoughts. If this turned into a screaming match, I wanted to remain calm. That's something my years in law enforcement had taught me. Keep your cool. Let the other person unravel. Plus, I had to consider the comedic possibility that Karen might again lose her wig in dramatic fashion. The image made me grin despite the tension. I flipped through the ticket records one more time, recalling each incident. Parking in a handicapped spot, no permit. Blocking a fire hydrant. Illegally parking in a bus lane. Overstaying meter times by hours. She'd partially paid some, but not enough to clear them. According to my notes, the city had even threatened to escalate her case. Then she apparently changed addresses, likely Pine Grove, to avoid summons. It was all there in black and white. If the board or neighbors saw this, They'd see Karen's hypocrisy. I pictured her face when I revealed the documents. Would she flip out? Storm from the room? Possibly. But she'd lost all claim to moral high ground, in my eyes. That evening, I arrived at the community center early. The place was buzzing with residents who normally wouldn't attend. Even casual acquaintances were curious about that car situation. A few gave me sympathetic nods. Others just looked anxious. Karen strutted in last, wearing a crisp blouse and that same hairstyle, though I couldn't help but wonder if it was pinned more securely after the wig mishap. She carried a stack of papers, no doubt more pictures of my car. When our eyes met, her lips curled in a smirk. She seemed confident she'd get her rule passed. After some minor agenda items, the board called for Karen to present her parking approval proposal. She walked to the front, set up her laptop, and launched into a slideshow. Pictures of my black Ford from every angle, arrows pointing to the tinted windows and antenna, bold text reading, "Suspicious? Dangerous?" I actually saw a few residents stifle laughter. Maybe they were recalling the wig fiasco. But Karen pressed on, describing my vehicle as if it were an alien spaceship. "We simply can't allow unidentified official-style cars," she proclaimed. "This is about the safety of our families. We have to preserve Pine Grove's property values." Finally, she ended with a flourish, calling for a vote. The board opened the floor for questions. That was my cue. I raised my hand. "Karen," I began, my voice even, "we've heard your concerns, but how about we talk about your track record with parking laws?" She stiffened, eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" I stepped forward, holding up the thick file. "This is a record of your unpaid parking tickets, some going back years. You've ignored summons, partially paid fines, and never completed them. So while you're pushing new rules on the rest of us, maybe you should address your own obligations first." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A neighbor murmured, "She never mentioned that." Another whispered, "Oh my gosh, is that real?" Karen's face turned crimson. That's not relevant. This meeting is about your suspicious car, not my personal business." I looked at her calmly. "If you want to enforce every letter of the law, we can't ignore the fact that you've consistently broken parking laws yourself. In fact, I personally ticketed you a few times, back when I was a patrol cop." That last statement caused an audible stir. People realized I was more than just some random homeowner. A tall man in the back called out, "Karen, have you really not paid those tickets?" Another woman asked, "Are you serious about evicting someone over a legal car when you never paid your own fines?" Karen tried to regain composure, clutching the edges of her slideshow remote. "This is a smear tactic," she spat. "He's using private information to undermine me. This is about protecting Pine Grove." I shrugged. "I'd say this is about someone ignoring their own responsibilities while harassing neighbors. Maybe it's time we vote with all the facts on the table." The board, visibly uncomfortable, decided to hold the official vote right then and there. They needed a simple majority to pass Karen's new bylaw. Hardly anyone raised their hand. A hush fell as the results were counted. It failed. Karen stood at the front, knuckles white around her papers. She looked around, presumably searching for any ally, but people avoided her gaze. In that moment, her bravado crumbled. The meeting ended in a flurry of whispered conversations. Some neighbors gathered around me, apologizing for not standing up sooner. Others congratulated me for having the courage to speak out. A few shook my hand, thanking me for clearing the air. Karen, however, slipped away, cheeks flushed a deep red. She avoided eye contact with everyone, especially me. Word spread quickly that she was deeply embarrassed, not just about losing the vote, but about being exposed for her own unpaid parking violations. The next morning, I took a walk around the neighborhood. For the first time, I felt like people were actually relaxed. They waved hello without that underlying tension. It seemed Karen's hold had weakened. Later that week, the board called an emergency HOA gathering. Karen didn't appear. The board president announced that Karen had stepped down from her role, citing personal reasons. A small wave of relief passed through the crowd. People clapped quietly. No one seemed sad to see her go. My car stayed exactly where it was, sitting peacefully in my driveway, now free of threatening letters and suspicious phone cameras. The new board started focusing on real issues like landscaping budgets, street lamp maintenance, and community events. Neighbors noticed the change immediately. Instead of fear and petty fines, we had genuine cooperation. No one had to dread coming home to a new violation pinned to their door. About a week later, a rumor circulated that Karen had shown up at the county office, writing checks to cover her outstanding tickets. One neighbor said they saw her carrying an envelope stuffed with money orders. Another claimed she tried to negotiate, but the clerk insisted on full payment. If it was true, it meant she was finally settling her debts. Meanwhile, the story of her wig fiasco, the moment it flew off her head while she tried to prove the antenna's danger, turned into a local legend. People told the story at barbecues, each adding their own comedic flair.